Good morning, students. This is Mr. Tan here, and welcome to another history class. Today, we will be starting on a new topic, this time concerning the people that came to live in colonial Singapore after the British set up a port here. You will need your textbooks as well as your history resource booklet, your notes. Please make sure that you have them with you before continuing this video. Before we continue, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned so far this year. In chapters 1 and 2, we learned all about the history of ancient Singapore, all the way from the 13th century to the 19th century. We focused on the types of connections that Temasek had with other countries and people. These connections can be grouped into three different types: economic, political, and cultural. Then, we learned about the different reasons that led to Temasek's rise in the 14th century: the fall of the Srivijaya kingdom, Temasek's role as an entrepot, the advantages of monsoons, as well as the role of the Orang Laut. Lastly, we learned why Singapore was chosen as a British port, because of its strategic location in the middle of the Chinese and India trade route, to break the Dutch monopoly of spice trade, and because Singapore had a deep and safe harbour. If you are confused or don't remember any of these, I suggest that you reread the textbook and notes, because these are all important pieces of information. Today, we will be looking at a new inquiry question. Why did people come to colonial Singapore before World War II? The question has a few parts, as you can see. Firstly, who were these people who came to Singapore? Where did they come from? What were the conditions that made people leave their homeland and/or attracted people to come to Singapore? And thirdly, the time period refers to the time period where British ruled Singapore, which is from 1819 to 1939. All ready? Let's move on. Please turn to page 7 of your notes. You will see a blank at the top part of your page. Please fill in this definition. Immigrants are people who move into a country to work or live there. Please copy this definition down and pause the video if you need more time. Look around you. Do you see or know anyone who is immigrants? Right. Are your parents or grandparents or even great-great-parents immigrants? Right. Maybe they came to Singapore from another country to find work or to escape a certain situation. The word immigrant is not a dirty word, so please do not feel offended by it. As you know, my father is actually an immigrant from Malaysia who came to Singapore looking for work. Immigrants still continue to form an important part of our community today. You will notice many immigrants in Singaporean society, such as construction workers and our domestic helpers. They are people who continue to help Singapore grow and become a better place. Right, after we have understood what the word immigrant means, let's take a closer look at who these people were that came to Singapore in the 19th and 20th centuries. You will see a diagram with 5 empty boxes in the middle of page 7. Please copy down the locations where these immigrants came from in those boxes. Pause the video if you need more time. On the top right-hand corner of the slides, you will also see page numbers in the textbook, where you can look for more information, as seen here. Now let's move on. The first place that immigrants came from was Europe. European men typically came to Singapore to do business or trade with their families, right, while their families followed them to Singapore. Some examples of the places in Europe are Britain, Germany, the Netherlands, Portugal, and France. The second place that immigrants came from was Arabia, or the Middle East. This area is located just next to Africa, and the immigrants from Arabia came mainly from Hadramaut, the southern part of Arabia. The third place that immigrants came from was India. Most of the Indian immigrants were southern Indian Tamils from Madras and Negapatam. The fourth place that immigrants came from was China. Most of them came from the southern provinces of China, such as Guangdong or Fujian. And lastly, the immigrants from Singapore came from the Malay archipelago. These areas included the Malay Peninsula, Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, and the Celebes, which are now modern-day Indonesia. Okay, so before we talk about the reasons that these immigrants came to Singapore, we also need to understand why the 19th century saw so many people moving around the world, or mass migration. Firstly, the Industrial Revolution happened in Britain. This was a period with massive improvements in technology and mass production, as steam was now used to power machines and other equipment. This led to the creation of new industries such as factories and the production of more goods, which required more raw materials. These raw materials were mainly found outside of Europe, and the Europeans started the search for these raw materials, bringing them to Asia. What are some of these examples and where were they found? You can refer to page 106 to find out more. The Industrial Revolution also led to the invention of steam technology, which changed how people travel around the world. Steamships, or ships powered by steam, allowed people to travel faster, allowed people to go further, and allowed people to spend less money to travel, made it cheaper. Right? Why is that so? Right? Steamships meant that people did not need to row their boats or rely on the wind, and they were able to go whenever they wanted to. Steamships were also larger than traditional ships, meaning that they could ferry more people. Right? Okay, this led to mass migration as people left their home countries to look for opportunities or to escape from certain places. The second reason for mass migration was the end of slavery. Right, a slave is a person owned by someone, right? And previously, trading ships would set sail from Europe, right, to take captured people as slaves and send them to work in plantations or other places. These people had no pay and they would basically work until they died. Right. In 1833, they made it illegal for British ships to transport slaves. This meant that European countries such as Britain had to look for other sources of cheap labor. Right. They needed the laborers to build their settlements, to build roads, and work on the farms, etc. Therefore, they looked to people in other countries such as China and India to bring them to these settlements. The last reason for mass migration is the opening of the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was actually a man-made canal that cut through Egypt and opened in 1869. This greatly shortened the route when traveling between England, and India, as now they did not need to go all the way around Africa and could just cut through this part here. The canal link between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea actually decreased the time, that people could travel and made it more attractive to travel across different parts of the world. If you want to find out how long a journey took from London to Singapore, you may refer to page 108 for more information. Wow, there was so much diversity and difference in the immigrants that came to Singapore. Now, why do you think these immigrants made the decision to travel all their way from their homes to this little island called Singapore? We will find out in a bit. Please turn to page 8 of your notes or stay on page 7 and watch this short video.
Whoa, what is that? Did you guys see it?
During a zombie outbreak, there will be lots of questions, such as, how did this happen? What do we do? Why am I stuck at school? No, seriously, where are all the teachers? But one question we need to know an answer to is, where do we go? This deals with the geography theme of movement. Movement is the spreading of goods, such as supplies, ideas, ways to build better forts, and people around the world. Goods and ideas move around the world because of people. So what is it that causes people to move around the world? There are two reasons that cause people to move. The first is push factor. Push factors are reasons that would force you to leave a location, usually negative, such as war, crime, zombie outbreak, or safety concerns.
Mr. M, are you sure the door's safe?
Yeah, they're safe.
Second reason is pull factors. Pull factors are reasons that will encourage you to go to a location, usually positive. They can include jobs, resources, weather, and lack of zombies. For example, if you lived in an area which lacked necessary resources, it would make sense for you to move to an area that had those resources. Okay, time for a test. Here is a group of survivors, and here is a group of poor infected students. And lastly, this is a location that clearly has some resources. Okay, so is the push factor the infected or the location with resources? Make sure you yell your answer out really loud so the teacher can hear you. The correct answer was infected. As you can see, the infected are the push factor and the location with the supplies are the pull factor. And that's it. That's push and pull. Real easy, right? Now this is what everybody wanted to see. Some zombie versus student action.
Wasn't that interesting? I hope that we never have to encounter a zombie apocalypse. But if something like that really happened, at least we will know the difference between the push and the pull factor. Now let's take a look at page 7 again. You will see that the main reasons that immigrants came to Singapore can be grouped into two types of factors: push and pull factors. Push factors are things like zombies or the lack of food, and they are involuntary. That means that people do not have a choice and they have to leave in order to survive. After all, who would want to live in a place filled with zombies? Please, push factors are conditions that force people to settle elsewhere. Please fill in the word force in the blank of the box. Pull factors, on the other hand, are voluntary and they present people with a choice. Pull factors are conditions that attract people to go to a new place because there are good things to be found there, such as jobs, weapons to defend yourself, and so on. Pause the video now and take a moment to think about push and pull factors. Do you think that they still exist in our world today? Okay, moving on. Now let's take a closer look at push factors. The first push factor we will refer to is poverty and starvation. Poverty and starvation refer to poor living conditions caused by overpopulation and natural disasters. Overpopulation refers to too many people living in one area, and natural disasters include floods, famines, and so on. You may fill this in the blank on your notes. Pause the video for a while and think about this. How do overpopulation and natural disasters force people away from their homes? Overpopulation results in less food for everyone and less jobs available. Natural disasters such as droughts can further decrease the amount of food available. The poor living conditions cause people to experience hunger and they could not earn enough money to feed their families. Therefore, they had to leave their hometown to survive. If you notice, the first bullet point is actually the elaboration for your short answer question. The second bullet point here is the link. Now, we will talk about some of the examples from different parts of the world. Firstly, in Java, they faced overpopulation which caused immigrants to leave their homes. The cultivation system started by the Dutch in 1830 caused many people to not have enough food to eat. This was because Java's land was used to grow goods for the Dutch to sell, such as sugarcane and indigo, instead of rice to feed the growing population. This meant that there was simply not enough food to go around. Secondly, in China, people also face the problem of overpopulation. The number of people or the population of China doubled between 1650 to 1800. There was just not enough farmland to sustain the rapid population growth because they could not produce enough food for everyone. Therefore, many people suffered from starvation, and this forced people to leave their homes and go elsewhere. In India, natural disasters such as droughts also cause famines, which is the lack of food. As many people were not able to grow food due to the lack of water, a lot of people experienced poverty and starvation since farmers had nothing to sell and people had nothing to eat. For example, the Great Famine, which lasted for 2 whole years from 1876 to 1878, is estimated to have caused 10 million deaths. That's about twice the population of Singapore. Do you think that you will want to stay in your home country if you encounter a situation like this? I don't think so, right? Now let's move on to the second push factor, unrest and instability. Please highlight this on page 7, page 8. Unrest and instability are caused by wars, rebellions, and lawlessness. This means that the places which people live in are no longer safe, and they fear for their lives. People wanted to leave their homeland to seek more peaceful lives where they will be safe and protected. Once again, the first bullet point is your elaboration, and your second bullet point is your link. Why the unrest and instability caused people to leave their hometowns? It's because they were afraid for their lives and they wanted to look for a peaceful place to live. Let's move on to some examples. In Java, wars contributed to the unrest and instability of the area. For example, the Java War with the Dutch in 1825 to 1830 caused about the deaths of 200,000 people. It also destroyed a quarter of the cultivated land in central Java. This land could have been used for farming, but instead now it was not able to be used. Next place we will talk about is China. For example, there were many examples of rebellions, wars, and lawlessness. The first example here is the Taiping Rebellion, which happened from 1850 to 1864. It was actually started by a man called Hong Xiuquan, who believed that he was the brother of Jesus Christ, and he wanted to overthrow the Manchu Empire to set up a heavenly kingdom in China. There were also clan wars between different dialect groups. For example, the Cantonese and the Hakkas often fought each other over the control of land that was used for farming. Lastly, there was also the civil war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Red Army in the 1930s, which caused a lot of death and destruction over China. Lastly, India also faced wars and rebellions, which forced people out of their home countries. The Indian Rebellion in 1857 involved a group of sepoys or British Indian soldiers that served the British who rebelled against their British officers. This spread across India, causing a lot more uprisings and cases of violence. As a result, many Indian rebels were caught by the British and sent overseas as convict labor. Basically, they had to do hard labor overseas as their punishment, such as building roads and clearing out forests. As you may have noticed, both push factors are closely linked to each other. Poverty and starvation can cause people to perform acts of violence or rebel against the government in order to survive, which then leads to unrest and instability. On the other hand, unrest and instability can also lead to poverty and starvation, especially when farmland is destroyed or farmers are killed, in the example of Java. As a conclusion, people have basic needs that they must have to survive, such as food, water, and a safe environment. Without these things, they are forced. They are forced to go somewhere else to survive. That is why some immigrants came to Singapore, because of push factors. We will now talk about pull factors. Pull factors are things that attract people to a certain place because there are good things there. The first pull factor here is better trade and business opportunities. Right? As we have learned before, Singapore offered many trading opportunities because of its excellent geographical location, its status as a free port, and its free immigration policy. What do these terms mean? Please copy this down and pause the video if you need more time. A free port means that traders do not need to pay huge amounts of taxes when they buy or sell things in Singapore. A free immigration policy means that people from all over the world could easily come into Singapore to work or trade instead of having to apply for permission. This will be the elaboration part of your SAQ answer. Right. The excellent geographical location, its status as a free port, and the free immigration policy meant that it was very easy to do business in Singapore and make profit. These all combined together to attract traders and businessmen to do business in Singapore. That would be your link. Now, let's take a look at some of the examples of the different traders who came to Singapore. Firstly, immigrants from Britain came to Singapore to set up British agency houses. Agency houses were companies that helped British manufacturers or producers to sell their goods to other traders in Singapore. You can think of this like an olden day Shopee or Q10. Right, what did they sell? They sold goods like cloth, clocks, knives, and nails. Some of the examples of British agency houses in Singapore included Balstead and Company and Guthrie and Company. Another example were the Straits-born Chinese, or the Chinese Peranakan traders. Straits-born Chinese refer to people of mixed Chinese and Indonesian or Malay heritage, especially when the Chinese traders from the 13th to 17th centuries came to Southeast Asia to set up their trading ports. These traders were attracted by trading opportunities in Singapore, and they set up their own trading houses to buy and sell goods. Another example were the Bugis traders from the Riau Islands and other places in the Malay archipelago. The Bugis traders were affected by heavy taxes that the Dutch imposed on their ports. Therefore, when they heard of Singapore's free port status, they were attracted, this is a pull factor, and they decided to come to Singapore to trade. By the beginning of the 20th century, several hundred Bugis traders have moved to Singapore. If you can see on the bottom right hand corner, that picture is actually Kampong Bugis in 1899. Lastly, Arab traders were also attracted to Singapore. As we have learned in chapter 2, Arabian traders have actively been trading in Southeast Asia since the 7th century. In the 19th century, another wave of Arab traders arrived in Singapore due to steamships and the opening of the Suez Canal. Right. The person here in the picture is Syed Sharif Omar bin Ali Al Junid. He's one of the first Arabs to come to Singapore and establish himself as a successful trader of spices as well as cotton from England. Right. The second pull factor that we are going to talk about is better job prospects. Previously, we learned that one of the push factors, poverty and starvation, caused people to leave their hometowns because they could not find enough work or money to feed their families. As Singapore was a new and growing trading settlement, workers were needed to build a new harbour, repair ships, clear jungles, and so on. Please copy down the words in the blanks and pause the video if you need more time. As Singapore was a new and growing trading settlement, there was no shortage of jobs. Poorer immigrants could also receive a higher salary in Singapore because the Europeans were willing to pay more money to attract them to come to Singapore to work. This was all very attractive for immigrants from places like Java, China, and India who suffered from poverty and starvation. Therefore, immigrants were attracted to Singapore because they could find work and better pay, which would allow them to survive and feed their families. For example, the Javanese and the Baweanese were attracted by the higher salary offered in Singapore compared to their hometown. For example, Javanese writers and publishers could write and print articles and stories in Singapore freely, right, where they were previously restricted in their homeland by Dutch laws. So in Singapore, they were able to do this and they were able to earn more money as a result. If you want to find more examples, please look at page 130 of your textbook. In conclusion, we have learnt about the two different factors that caused immigrants to come to Singapore during colonial times. These are push factors and pull factors. Push factors are involuntary and they force people away from their homes, just like how zombies will force you to leave your home. Pull factors are voluntary and they attract people to a new place because there are good things there, just like how you can find better jobs, how you can have better business opportunities. Push and pull factors can work together to influence the decisions of immigrants to come to Singapore. For example, people in China who suffered from unrest and instability would be attracted to Singapore because of the better job prospects. The push factor of instability and unrest and the pull factor of better job prospects will combine together to give people a very strong reason to come to Singapore. That's all for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please read through your textbooks and notes before the next lesson and clarify any doubts that you have either on the Google Classroom or by messaging me privately. Do look out on the Google Classroom for any additional instructions as well. Thank you so much and have a nice day. Bye-bye.